Today I'm giving my runner's review of the Polar OH1 heart rate monitor versus the brand new Polar Verity Sense. 10.45 miles, 8 minutes, 6 seconds per mile on average, and 151 beats per minute, at least according to the Polar OH1 armband monitor for today. Today's workout was, I think, a really good workout to test out a new heart rate monitor for today because it was a speed day. I'm getting ready for the Shamrock Shuffle, the virtual event, 8K, coming up on March 21st. Today's workout was 6 times 200 at mile pace, 200 jog, another 200 at mile pace, another 200 jog, another 400 and a 400 meter jog. So that set 6 times was the workout for today. So getting the heart rate up and down a bunch of times, and then some easy running for the cool down and the warm up. So a perfect time to be testing out these two armband heart rate monitors. But before I go into detail on what I think about these two heart rate monitors, I do want to go over some disclosures. The Verity Sense was a heart rate monitor that was sent to me for the purpose of review by Polar. I did buy the OH1 myself. I'm also going to be talking about the Vantage V2 that was sent to me by Polar as well. So a mix of things that were purchased or sent, but in either event, no one's paying me to make this video or to use any of these products. And no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Polar Verity Sense versus the Polar OH1. Now, I think the first thing that's worth talking about is why you would even need an external heart rate monitor from a runner's perspective, especially if you're already paying a lot of money for a GPS running watch that has an optical heart rate sensor on the back of it. The reason for me is that these optical heart rate sensors, no matter how fancy the watch, whether I'm using Polar, Garmin, Coros, Suunto, Apple Watch, none of them work for me when I'm running. I don't know if it's my skin tone, my musculature, what it is, but it'll be fine for like a little while, 20-30 minutes, and then afterwards the readings just start going crazy. We'll just start to spike. And I think that what's happening, the watch is sliding around no matter how much I try to cinch it down and no matter how I try to place it more appropriately for a heart rate reading, I'm still getting like a lot of like my arm movements are confusing the sensor, and I'm getting a lot of cadence along with my heart rate. So the heart rate just kind of pegs to right around like 170 and just kind of stays there if I'm using only a watch. So I usually need something that's external. Now, the reason why I like armband monitors, which both of these heart rate monitors are armband monitors, is because right now it's winter time, and normally I would use a chest strap, the kind that goes across the chest and like uses conduction right against your chest to get that heart rate. And so that's a great one that I like to use during the summer. It fits right under kind of like the singlet or the t-shirt that I'm wearing, and everything tends to work fine. In the winter time though, those sensors don't tend to conduct as well for me. So I either have to use like a conductive gel, or I'm getting inconsistent and unreliable readings from a chest strap. So in the wintertime, that's when I usually move over from the chest strap to the armband heart rate monitor. Now you can certainly use these during the summertime as well, though a lot of it comes down to personal preference. And there are two different technologies that we're talking about here. These armbands are optical sensors, just kind of like the ones that are on the back of your watch, while chest strap monitors are using a slightly different technology in order to get that heart rate reading. For the purposes of reviewing my heart rate data from a runner's perspective, I'm not using it for diagnosis or medical purposes. To look at my heart rate from a runner's perspective, the two technologies don't make a huge difference to me. All right, so with that being said, let's talk about the Verity Sense and the Polar OH1. Basically, I would say that these are pretty much the same heart rate monitor, at least from a runner's perspective. The Verity Sense is just a little bit more of everything than the OH1 is. I mean, both of them have the same design, but they look almost identical. Opening the box, I felt like the Verity Sense was maybe a little bit bigger, but I had to look at the stats that Polar provides on their website to see that essentially we're talking about fractions of millimeters in terms of which one is bigger or thicker than the other. From a practical perspective, each heart rate monitor can fit in the other heart rate monitors, armbands, and chargers and still work. Verity Sense has bigger broadcast range, which I think can matter if you're doing other sports, but for running, when I usually have this paired to a phone, it's not gonna make a huge difference for me. Also, there's more memory in the Verity Sense versus the Polar OH1. You can store more workouts. You don't need a phone to be able to store your heart rate during your activity, so you can just go phoneless if that's what you wanna do. Again, for me, as someone that tethers it to a phone, not going to be a big deal to have more memory either. The things that are more relevant to me as a runner are that there's more battery life in the Verity Sense, 20 hours of use versus 12 hours of use in the Polar OH1. And again, from a practical perspective, what that means to me is with the Polar OH1, about every 4 days, I'm sticking this thing back onto the charger. I really wish that there was a way to like see, like from a battery meter kind of perspective, either on my watch or on my phone, how much life is left so I can kind of have a better feel for it rather than just like guessing. But for me, about 4 days is about how far I can get in this, even though it says it can last, I think, up to 12 hours, which is about a week for me. For my perspective, just to be safe, I always, after about the 4th day, put it on the charger. For the Verity Sense, it has 20 hours of battery life that's claimed, so I should be able to get easily throughout an entire week without having to worry about charging this back up. So I'm thinking pretty much after my long run over the weekend, that's when I'll put it on the charger, then I'll be ready for the entire next week. So kind of that's going to be my approach to it. The other thing that's different is the OH1 is $80, where the Verity Sense is another additional $10, so $90 for the Verity Sense. I think swimmers are going to be the most excited, and for the swimming use case, that's the most important kind of change as far as this device goes. I'm not a swimmer, I don't swim. I can barely not drown, but in case you are interested in using this for triathlon training, for example, both of these devices do come with a goggle clip, so you can put it right on your temple, and that's how it's going to be able to get your heart rate during your swim. But the new feature, and I feel like this is magic, I wish that they would explain a little bit more how they're doing this, because I don't understand it. But from this heart rate sensor, if you put it inside the goggle clip, it's going to be able to tell you in the pool, as long as you tell it like what size pool you're swimming in, how many laps you're doing, and what your pace is for those laps, which I think is just absolutely phenomenal. I don't know if there's other devices that do this, because again, I don't swim, but it just sounds magical to have just this one tiny little heart rate sensor that can do everything if you just clip it to your goggles. So that's going to be, I think, the big sell for a lot of people as they're getting back into pools, that you're going to be able to record all this data just from this one little device. That I think is amazing. Not so amazing for me, because I can't remember the last time that I was in a pool, and I think the last time I was in a pool for exercise purposes was definitely over a decade ago, so not something that I tend to do. Let's take a look at the data for today's workout, and I'll show you some heart rate data between these two heart rate monitors for the following day's run that I went on with both of these devices. So the way that I tested these is I put each of these on my arm, one on my forearm, one on the bicep, and then I switched them on subsequent days. One of the days I would run with them using it standalone, recording to itself, and the other one recording to my watch, and then I flipped it for the second day. And here's what it looks like. For the first day, the running footage that you saw, the speed workout, here's the tracing, and I put it through the DC Rainmaker Analyzer tool, and for the most part, both of these are giving me pretty much the exact same tracing. There's a little bit on the front end and on the back end from the Verity Sense on the first day, because that's when I was using the Verity Sense as a standalone device. So like you have to get it started, and then I have to like put my jacket on, get outside the building. I don't remember if I put it on before or after my warm up, but get it into like recording mode, and then I ran. I didn't like start recording on it. It doesn't quite work that way. It's not like a stopwatch right when I started the activity, although that's kind of how the recording starts when you have a heart rate monitor paired to the watch. So that's why there's a little bit of a difference on like the front and the end. Same thing with the cool down. I didn't stop the heart rate monitor right away when it was in standalone recording mode. But it did a fantastic job, both of these devices, recording not only my heart rate during the warm-up, but also during all the different repetitions that I had throughout the course of the workout. Now, there was one point where there was a big difference between these two devices, and it's not because of the devices themselves. I think a lot of it had to do with the strap and kind of placement as well. So even though this was a very cold day, with the jacket that I had on and the intensity that I was working, things get a little bit kind of clammy in here. Not wet, they're not dripping with sweat, but a little bit clammy. I had the OH1 on the forearm and the Verity Sense on the bicep. And the OH1 on the forearm has been giving me this issue for my longer workout runs, even during the winter time when it's cold and I'm not that sweaty, where it just kind of starts to slip down the arm just a little bit. And I definitely had that today. That's part on the tracing where the heart rate just kind of spikes even though I'm in my cool down. That's what was going. I was like fidgeting with it, trying to make sure, trying to like slide it back up. I have 2 pairs of gloves on in the winter, and I'm trying to do it through the jacket without like pulling up my jacket, so it's kind of a weird shimmy. So I'm fighting with it there, and that's what's going on. That's something that happens with the forearm location. I think that this is something relatively new to me. It's been happening a little bit over the last kind of month, maybe 2 months. And I think that I've had this OH1 for a while now, and I just think that the elastic just isn't quite as grippy as it once was. The bicep location for the Verity Sense was perfect. It didn't move at all. It stayed really put. And I think that's gave me like the most accurate tracing for the day. Flip it around on the following day, we could see that this is just an easy run with a couple of strides thrown in the middle of it. So a couple of quick spikes in terms of the heart rate. Again, both devices are doing pretty much the exact same thing, which is what I would expect. And this time I had it reversed where the Verity Sense was on the forearm and the OH1 was up on the bicep. So I had no issues, even though I feel like this strap is maybe losing a little bit of stretchiness with the device up on the bicep. Now, granted, I don't feel like I got quite as clammy because the strides are enough to get my heart rate up, but not really like for an extended period of time, like 6 reps of 200, 200, 400. So a little bit of a different workout, but I do feel like overall for me, it might just be that I need to start moving the heart rate monitor up to the bicep level rather than leaving it on the forearm. Because again, it's just sliding around. And so just to make sure I'm getting a better location, that's what I'm gonna do with it. The other thing might be that the band is bigger on the Verity Sense than it is on the OH1, and that's something that I've also taken into consideration. It is also a lot more like springy and compressive because it is a newer band, so that might be something as well. I think I might be able to solve kind of all my problems if I just bought a replacement band of the OH1, and that is available, and Polar does sell that. So if you're thinking, do I need to upgrade just for the band? You know, I would say just try getting a replacement band of the OH1. That might solve any of your problems if you're starting to see kind of some slippage from your normal location or move your location. The other thing is, though, I do think that there is a difference in terms of not only just the thickness of the band. It now has like a little Velcro attachment point to it, so it can be easier to slide on or off, but also there is a little bit more structure in terms of the encasing of that heart rate monitor within this strap. And there's this kind of U-shaped design, which I think when there's tension put on this strap is gonna kind of push that heart rate monitor into your skin just a little bit more securely. So I think that might aid a little bit in making sure, for me, like when I have that longer run with some more intensity to it, where I might normally see some movement in that heart rate monitor, hopefully this is gonna keep it a little bit more in place. Whether it's going to make a huge difference in the long run, I'm not really sure, but it makes me feel a lot more confident nonetheless, and I understand what they're doing with that. It makes sense to me. The one last other difference that I'll say that I do appreciate as someone that uses this heart rate monitor on a daily basis is that there's a little button, a very little button on each of these heart rate monitor devices, and that's how you turn it on, or if you were switching it over to like recording mode, like those are the buttons that you would push. On the Verity Sense, this button is just like a millimeter bigger, like it's deeper, so there's a longer travel for that button push, and it makes it easier to reach, especially when I've got mittens or gloves on. I've definitely had a hard time trying to turn on my heart rate monitor with the OH1 when I'm reaching through a jacket or to turn it off. And this is a lot easier to press, so I'm really happy that that very, very small detail was paid attention to. But overall, I think the differences between these two bands are pretty minimal. If you've got the OH1 and you're happy with it, unless you're a swimmer and need that kind of pace and distance function, I would say you don't need to go out and get an upgrade to the Verity Sense. If you really like the band, Your OH1 monitor will fit in the new band, so you can buy just the band and check that out if that's something you want to do. If you really need the much longer battery life, I mean, if you're out there for a really long time on your ultra distance adventures and need that extra battery, that could be a reason as well. But for me, as a road runner, a marathoner, and a half marathoner, this is not a huge update for me. And I would say for most people, runners that are like me, you probably don't need to upgrade. So those are my thoughts on the Polar Verity Sense optical armband heart rate monitor versus the OH1. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions. I'd love to answer them down there. Or better yet, feel free to stop by the live stream that I do just about every day on YouTube, 3 p.m. Central Time. Hopefully I could see you there. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?